and welcome. We're pleased you can join us today for the launch of the International Energy Agency's new special report on the future of geothermal energy. I'm Jethro Mullen, head of the IEA's communications team, and I'm joined today by IEA Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, and by the report's lead authors, Hamy Bahar and Brent Wanner. During today's event, Dr. Birol will make some opening remarks, and then Hamy and Brent will present the key findings of the report. We'll then take questions from journalists. For the journalists taking part in this press webinar, we invite you to send your questions via the Q&A function in the Zoom. You can do this at any point during the presentation, and we'll also take a 2-minute break right after the presentation for you to enter your questions. And with that, I'll hand over to our Executive Director, Dr. Birol.
Thank you very much, Jethro. Greetings from International Energy Agency headquarters in Paris. Dear colleagues, today we are in front of you to present a new report, a special report on the future of geothermal energy. I guess many of us know, many of us are aware that the geothermal energy is with us since decades. And it is a versatile energy source. It is a clean energy source, and it is a secure energy source. I say versatile because you can use geothermal energy for electricity generation. You can use it for heating homes, or you can use it for the industry sector. It is clean because it doesn't emit any emissions, and it is secure. One of the most important features of the geothermal energy is it is around the clock. Day and night, you can have the energy from geothermal. But up to now, currently, geothermal's contribution to the global energy is very limited. Only a few countries around the world and we get energy from the easily accessible geothermal potential. But, there is a big but there, a major technological revolution is in making as far as the geothermal energy is concerned. And it is the very reason why we have this special report. The technological advances in the, for the geothermal energy can unlock major amount of new potential. And the technology that we are talking about is not a technology which is just being invented. It is a technology that has been used for shale oil and gas in North America. So the horizontal drilling and the hydraulic fracturing. As a result of this, applying these technologies, we can go deeper and make a huge amount of geothermal potential available, and as such, it can provide a huge opportunity for having an additional secure and clean energy source. Now, the key big questions for us here is the question of cost. Current cost, when we look at the current cost levels, they are very high. It is about over $200 per megawatt hour. It already came up a bit in the last few years, but we expect, looking at the trajectory and discussing with many players in the sector, with a conservative, I underline this, with a conservative assumption, we think the cost can come down significantly in the next 10 years to come, and we expect about $50 per megawatt hour. So what does $50 means? It means that it can be cost competitive with, for example, hydro or solar and wind energy coupled with batteries. So it can be cost effective in the next years to come. And if it is the case, this is achievable, and I can assure you that our cost assumptions are much more conservative than many, if not all, the startups, the companies have for their businesses. But if it is the case, we may well expect that for example, in terms of electricity from geothermal energy can make up around 15% of global electricity demand growth. Dear colleagues, before I pass the floor to my colleagues, I wanted to highlight 3 other points. Number 1, we see a lot of activity when it comes to the new chapter of the geothermal energy. In US, in Europe, in China, India, in many parts of the world, and lots of investments going, and we expect these investments can reach over $1 trillion in about 10 years of time. This is number 1. Number 2, maybe this is for the energy sector, a good news. When we look at the entire geothermal project we are talking about now, from A to Z, we see that there is a huge overlap between the capabilities and skills needed in the oil and gas industry and the geothermal. About 80% of the skills and the capabilities needed in the oil and gas industry sector can be applied to geothermal. So this is a major advantage in my view, for oil and gas industry. I know that some of the major oil and gas companies are still wait and see mood, but some others are moving rapidly. But this is something that can provide a diversification opportunity for the oil and gas industry. My final point is, in order to accelerate and enable the growth of geothermal energy, there is an important role for governments, policymakers, if they want to make from this secure and clean energy source a good use for the energy mix. There, in our report, we made a few suggestions for the policymakers, but I would like to highlight 2 of them. The first one is that providing the framework that the permitting is faster and done in a more nimble way. Currently, it takes far too long to get the permitting and the licensing. It will be very helpful, of course, without compromising the environmental standards that we have to be in line with. This is the first thing that we suggest the governments to give a good look into. The second one is to help for funding, providing support, especially in the early phases, to give some financial support. There is already a big demand. For example, is several data centers, the artificial intelligence companies, they want to have secure, uninterrupted electricity, and as such, they are making long-term contracts with some of the geothermal providers, but the support, financial support, at least in the beginning, coming from governments, will make sure that we get a lot of geothermal energy. The potential is huge around the world, again in US, in Canada, India, China, Europe, many parts of the world. And as International Energy Agency, we thought, looking at the new developments on the technology front, These are exciting developments. We put it in the economic and energy context and share with the world what could it mean, the next chapter of the geothermal energy for our energy mix. So I would like to thank here my colleagues Hemi Bahar and Brett Venner, who led this project. I commissioned this report only in July, in a very short period of time, with a big team at TAIE from different divisions. They put together this report, and I think they are going to share with you some of the findings of this report. And as such, I am now turning to my colleague, Mr. Bahar, for the listening him and learning from him. Over to you, Hemi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. Welcome to the webinar. When we look at geothermal's versatility, it is really a clean energy technology that can play a multiple role in the clean energy transitions. Today, geothermal energy used is for small applications to heating and cooling homes, such as geothermal heat pumps. You have larger heating applications, including district heating and direct use in homes and commercial buildings, but also very small penetration in the agriculture and industrial sector. While the majority of the use of the geothermal for the final energy consumption is for heating purposes, electricity accounts for 20% of the geothermal use today. So there are only few technologies, especially clean energy technologies like geothermal, that can provide this kind of a versatility that can meet heating, cooling, electricity, and industrial use at the same time. But still, conventional geothermal today accounts for only 1% of the global energy demand, which is quite small, and we will see where we expect this conventional energy to grow. There are few places in the world that has this conventional energy potential before moving into these technological breakthroughs. In our scenarios, we expect geothermal to grow, and by 2050, in our announced pledges scenario, we can reach up to 80 gigawatts of the installed capacity. However, this remains, in terms of the electricity generation, remains less than 1%, and it is only concentrated in locations such as Indonesia, Turkey, Kenya, Philippines, and Ethiopia, where the still easy to access potential exists, to be able to tap into that. However, next chapter of the geothermal is quite different. The technical potential analysis that we did is through these technology developments, and which are opening new horizons. And what is this technology developments? First of all is enhanced geothermal systems, which are using hydraulic fracturing to create artificial reservoirs for geothermal heat to extract through under the ground at depths starting from 2,000 meters, but going all the way down to 4,000 or 5,000 meters. This is the innovation that is happening today, and we expect this innovation to unlock a lot of technical potential. There is another technology that is being developed, which is called closed-loop systems, where geothermal drilling reaches more than 4,000 meters to create some kind of a radiator under the ground to circulate cold and hot water to be able to use for multiple applications, including heating and cooling. These two technologies, enhanced geothermal systems and closed-loop or advanced geothermal systems, have a huge potential that can be unlocked, which we analyzed for this report and compared with other renewable technologies. When we look at the technical potential of today, as I mentioned, geothermal's role is quite small with the conventional technology. However, when you go deeper it becomes really significant. Beyond 3,000 kilometers, a lot of geothermal energy is already unlocked, but going 5,000 meters beyond creates an incredible potential that can go up to 600 terawatts or 600,000 gigawatts. Then geothermal becomes, as a technical potential, comparable to many other technologies. It's right after solar PV, which has a much larger potential, but it is, as it stands, it's a technical potential at 8,000 kilometers is the combination of onshore and offshore wind together, which is quite significant compared to this. It can also meet this full potential 140 times global electricity demand. But what is truly interesting is that this potential is not location specific anymore, as in the conventional technologies. We are going way beyond that and unlocking a potential that is all around the world. Here you can see in the map only at 2,000 meters what we can achieve, the usual countries that has geothermal today. At 4,000 meters we are already unlocking a lot of locations in North America, Africa and Eurasia and Southeast Asia. But reaching 7,000 meters makes the picture completely different and makes geothermal everywhere in the world. Which is quite important developments that we can expect for the market potential, which I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Brent to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Hemi, and thank you, Dr. Birol, for opening this morning. So I would pick up from here on this potential. So it's really everywhere in the world, and as Dr. Birol said at the beginning, one of the key questions, or the key question, is on the costs of the technology. And so here we see there's major overlaps with the oil and gas industry, as was mentioned. To give an idea of what kind of activities those overlaps are, if we look at conventional geothermal, there's actually significant overlap there already, from evaluation, planning and management, to the drilling itself, as well as the operations at the surface level. And that's about 60% of the overall costs for a conventional geothermal project have significant overlaps with oil and gas expertise. But for next generation geothermal projects, both enhanced geothermal and closed loop systems, that proportion is even higher because of the importance of those drilling activities and the depths that you need to go to. And here it's that there's so many similar processes to the oil and gas upstream activities. This overlap in those costs gives us this potential for deep cost reductions going forward. Oil and gas operations currently regularly drill down to 5 kilometers depth, 5,000 meters. As Hemi mentioned, this is where significant potential opens up, and we see this, start to see this around the world, and activities are going deeper towards that 7-8 kilometers of depth. And overall, when we look, there's about 80% of the total costs of next generation geothermal overlap directly with oil and gas skills. So if we look at the total cost then of enhanced geothermal systems, where in particular the hydraulic fracturing and directional drilling cross over and can transfer, if we look at how that could address and bring down the costs of new projects. So today, as mentioned, those costs are high, but with some transfer, some of the standard practices, even without direct engagement of the oil and gas industry, we can see some cost reductions coming, but this would be a low level of transfer and would miss out on these major opportunities to bring down costs in the drilling and activities and at the surface. Things like research and development on the working fluids and new equipment that would be needed for geothermal, bringing in the economies of scale that oil and gas industry can bring, and also the technology spillover, along with acquiring and developing subsurface information and directly for geothermal. If you factor these in, also the evaluation and planning side, you could bring down the costs of geothermal, of next generation geothermal, by 3/4 in the years ahead. And that's really, again, where we're seeing these opportunities that could open up huge market potential around the world. And so we did a country-by-country assessment of the competitiveness of next generation geothermal and those opportunities that those lower costs could open. So when we translate that into a levelized cost of electricity, we see, as mentioned by Dr. Birol today, those costs are high, but by 2035, we see that they could be reduced by 80% down to this $50 per megawatt hour level, which is an extremely low cost, would make it one of the cheapest sources of electricity of any kind in the world as we know it. And to give a sense of how realistic or how possible this cost reduction pathway is, it's something actually we've seen in the last decade. So this is very much would be following in the footsteps of the solar PV cost reductions that we've seen since 2013, which have come down also from about $200 per megawatt hour down below $50 per megawatt hour. We've also seen cost reductions for wind, for batteries, and for electric vehicles. So we've seen waves of technology innovation that have really changed the picture, the global energy landscape, and next generation geothermal could add to that picture and could be another option that can change the future of energy. That potential that it can open up, we assessed, again, country by country. In total, we see over 800 gigawatts of electrical capacity that could be unlocked, that could be cost-effective market potential for next-generation geothermal. The United States here is a technology leader driving innovation, and we see that as a leading market, then complemented also by emerging markets and economies, China, India, and in Southeast Asia in particular, where electricity demand growth is growing very rapidly. But the versatility of geothermal can also benefit economies that are ahead in these transitions, like in the United States and in Europe, so that the versatility of geothermal can complement high shares of wind and solar, so it can be a flexible option as well. If we think of that in terms of investment overall for next generation geothermal, we see that this scaling up, what it would take to actually fulfill and deliver that market potential, would already surpass $1 trillion by 2035. Now that's a very large amount of money, but to give a sense of scale for that, that's as much investment as we've seen in wind power in the last 7 years and in solar PV just in the last 3 years. So this amount of motivation, if we are committed to those technologies at the policy level and at the company level, this sort of scale up can happen and that level of investment can be reached. And what that means then in total, as mentioned, is that next generation geothermal and geothermal overall can be a significant part of how we meet rapidly growing electricity demand. Whether it's for data centers, air conditioning, new appliances, households getting wealthier in emerging economies, the digitalization of our economies in advanced economies, geothermal we see has the potential to be to step up and be the third largest source of electricity demand growth or electricity growth to 2050, trailing only solar PV and wind here, but very much complementing that. And geothermal here providing 15% of electricity generation growth out to 2050. Now, of course, to do all this, we need those policymakers to focus on next generation geothermal and to raise it up the energy agenda, to take a look again at those opportunities for generation for geothermal, looking at it at the planning stage. We also need to make sure that the policies and regulations are there to ensure robust environmental and social safeguards. And in the end, this streamlining of permitting process is another area that we see as critical, as currently projects can take up to a decade to facilitate secure and affordable energy. We need those permitting processes to be streamlined to the extent possible. So with that, I would thank very much and hand it back as well to Jethro. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We now have time to take some questions from journalists. So we invite the journalists in the Zoom to send in your questions via the Q&A function, and if you haven't done so already. And we're just going to take a 2-minute break to give you a chance to enter your questions, and we'll be right back. Hello and welcome back. Thank you very much for the questions. We're going to try and get through as many of them as we can in the time we have. The first one comes from Amina Saeed from Cypher News. She asks, or she notes that the IEA expects conventional geothermal capacity to increase almost 50% to 22 gigawatts in 2030 and to almost 60 gigawatts in 2050 in the IEA stated policy scenario. So this is from our World Energy Outlook report. How do these figures change with the use of next generation geothermal technologies like the closed loop system or horizontal drilling? Then we also have a question from Nuran Erkal from Anadolu Agency. She asks about the EU, Europe. The EU is planning to promote geothermal energy in a way to replace Russian gas for energy security. How could geothermal contribute to the EU's energy security? What first steps should be taken in that direction? Is there enough potential in the EU? And then we have one other question about, more broadly, about, I guess, why we did the report. Geothermal only accounts for a small amount of global energy supply. Why is the IEA doing this report now? So perhaps, Hamid, you could talk a bit about how next generation geothermal can change the equation.
Once you go deeper, geothermal energy is, as we said, available almost everywhere in the world. When we take this into account with recent technology innovations, instead of 60 gigawatts by 2050, we are seeing 800 gigawatts by 2050. So more than 10 times what we see in our previously in our scenarios. This is obviously a big change, and we did this analysis based on the IEA modeling where the energy transition is going and what are the other technologies and how geothermal can complement these technologies, especially variable wind and solar, and also the other ones, and how it can contribute to the decarbonization of the power systems. And we found that 800 gigawatts can be installed, which is distributed all around the world, mostly concentrated in the United States, China, India, and Southeast Asia, where the demand is growing rapidly.
Thanks, Hamid. The next question was the one about the EU. How much can geothermal help with EU energy security? Brent, perhaps that one for you.
Thanks, Jethro, and thanks very much for the question. So I think this is very much the point that these new technologies are opening up potential in countries that previously didn't have many geothermal opportunities. We should note that conventional geothermal, Italy is the birthplace of conventional geothermal, having one of the first commercial projects in the world. And so Europe has long been home to geothermal, but these next generation technologies and deeper drilling, that opens up potential within the European Union that could meet energy demand and certainly electricity demand many times over. So the technical potential is absolutely there. Again, if the costs can come down that cost curve, we can have engagement and transfer of skills from the oil and gas industry, then these open up huge market potential as well within the European Union. So from a policymaker standpoint and some of those first steps that need to happen, it's about thinking about next generation geothermal within the overall energy planning process at the country level and looking across the European Union. Because as mentioned, this is a versatile, secure, and flexible source of electricity, heat, as well as it can provide cooling. So these are opportunities that can serve a number of needs, not just electricity generation, as mentioned, industrial processes and heating in buildings. So there's really no shortage on the potential side, and it can sit very well alongside and complement variable wind and solar. So it can be a way to manage the seasonal aspects also of electricity systems. And there's really, the market potential there will very much be in its overall role in the European Union in the process of transitions and delivering country plans is very much an open book and very much an open road ahead. So it's time to take another look at geothermal energy.
Thanks, Brent. And I guess for the big picture question, why did the IEA do this report? That's really one for our executive director. He's the person in charge. So, Dr. Birol, what are the reasons that we're doing this report now?
Many thanks, Jethro. Yes, this is a special report, dear colleagues. Why we are doing this special report? Why I have commissioned this report a few months ago, and my colleagues Hemi Bahar and Brent Werner with their team started to work on this in addition to their existing work, is the following. We thought, looking at the markets, we follow the markets and technology day by day, we see that there is a lot of excitement about application of the drilling technologies for shale oil and shale gas and the geothermal potential. And this is promising to bring the cost of geothermal down and being competitive with other energy sources. And as I said in the beginning, and as my colleagues Mr. Bahar and Mr. Werner mentioned, geothermal is a secure and clean energy source. There are huge expectations, prospects are really positive, but whether or not these prospects, these expectations will turn into reality is still a question. We wanted to make the governments, policymakers aware of this huge opportunity as a result of technological advancement and encourage them to take the necessary steps, both in terms of the helping to finance, but also in terms of the simplifying the licensing and permitting processes. So this is the reason we made this special report.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. And in line with what you're just saying, that we have another question talking about whether the right steps can be taken to bring down those costs, particularly with the role that the oil and gas industry can potentially play. This question asks, the oil and gas industry hasn't managed to bring down costs quickly for some other clean technologies like CCUS and hydrogen. What makes you think it will work for geothermal? And then another question more broadly about environmental sustainability. You described geothermal as clean energy, but aren't there some environmental risks from the drilling? Have you taken those into account? So for those two questions, perhaps Brent, you can talk a bit about whether this geothermal can be different from CCUS and hydrogen, and then Hemi on the environmental aspects.
Sure, thanks very much, Jethro. And again, thanks for the question. So I think the confidence that we have is very much based on also conversations with the industry and key players for this work, for the next generation geothermal work, which also included a large high-level workshop we hosted here in Paris in October, where we collected and gathered input from players across the landscape here. And some of those areas and why we think, why we're more confident for next generation geothermal is that these are really core activities for the oil and gas industry. The hydraulic fracturing and directional drilling have been key innovations in the shale gas and tight oil developments we've seen in North America over the past decade and a half. And so these activities where they have been able to go deeper, faster, for cheaper, and open up resources there is very much the same, it's walking the same path as those. So following and transferring that learning and benefiting from those activities in the geothermal space. So there, as mentioned, we can see that more than 3/4 of those activities and the costs of geothermal actually directly overlap with the oil and gas expertise. So there's a lot of reason to believe, whether it's from developing multi-pad drilling to moving on and having better mapping also of the underground resources, subsurface resources. These are activities the oil and gas industry is doing very well, and can be done for geothermal that will really drive down these costs. Thanks.
So coming to the environmental impacts, obviously every technology and minimizing the environmental impacts of these technologies is a key government role and responsibility, and geothermal is no different. Obviously, in terms of the drilling and the activities around that, there is a social acceptance challenges that we already know today. However, in order to address those, I think regulations and standards are key. Today, geothermal, international standards about geothermal environmental impacts are very limited. We believe that developing those based on the geothermal will be an important step forward to basically have a regulation that is accepted everywhere in the world. It will also help for the financial community and social community to understand and categorize the risks and evaluate them. And we believe that these standards are key to move forward for the next generation geothermal to be a sustainable technology going forward.
Very good. Thank you very much, Hamy and Brent. And that's all we have time for. We've covered all the main questions, but if any journalists have further questions, we invite you to reach out to our press office and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. One thing to note, if you are interested in the future of the global electricity sector, we have another interesting event coming up hot on the heels of this one in just under an hour at 11:30 a.m. Paris time, a discussion between our Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, and the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Mariano Grossi, where they'll be discussing whether or not we're entering a new era of nuclear energy. So do please join us for that. The whole conversation will be live streamed, and there's sure to be some interesting discussions. Otherwise, it just remains for me to say thank you very much to Dr. Birol, to Hamy, to Brent. Thank you very much to the journalists for the questions, and thank you to all of you following for your interest in our work. And a reminder that the full Future of Geothermal Energy report is available for free on our website to download, to read, to explore. So do please take a look. Thank you very much, and goodbye.